My interest in innovation was ignited during a motorcycle trip across Africa. My brother died shortly before then, and I was convinced that any of us could go at any time, so I was committed to living life fully. So it wasn't long after that I found myself on a big black road bike heading out of Cape Town, South Africa, towards Point Agulhas, the southernmost tip of Africa. It was a Sunday, early in the morning, bright, shiny day, and we were on a freshly paved road. There's only a few small clouds in the sky. The road cut through part of a mountain. We were up so high we could see the curvature of the earth, where the dark blue sea reached up and met the light blue sky. Because there was no traffic, my need for speed took over my common sense, and in no time I was going 100 miles an hour. The long sweeping curves through that cliff, through the side of that mountain, allowed me to lean over so far my foot pegs would skim the asphalt. I felt like I was flying. Wasn't thinking about yesterday or tomorrow or my do list or what was for lunch. I was in the zone. Until I came around a corner, and there, blocking the highway in front of me, was a pack of baboons. It's a cliff, the road, a cliff, and the ocean. Immediately I thought to myself, well, now I'm going to die. What on earth could I possibly do in order that I might live? So I had 4 memories flash before my consciousness. There were memories of my past month on this motorcycle. There were instructions about how to put something new together to create an innovative outcome that would allow me to live. So I pulled my body in tight. I hit the horns, the lights, the flasher, and started skidding the back tire. That got those baboons up on all fours. Then I started skidding sideways for maximum friction to slow down as fast as I could. Very similar to the time I almost hit a tank head on while entering Swaziland. And then when I got about 30 feet away from here to there, I pulled that motorcycle back around straight, pulled in the clutch down, shifted to first gear, redlined the motor, popped the clutch and yanked back as hard as I could, doing a wheelie through that pack of baboons. And they parted like Moses and the Red Sea. I remember the patriarch lunged at me with those jaws of a baboon, came at me trying to rip my leg off. Fortunately, he missed. I remember looking at the expression of the matriarch. She turned away and looked back with an expression that said, "Good Lord, that's an animal." And the one I remember the best was an adolescent who looked up at me wistfully, just like Jack Nicholson did at Peter Fonda in that movie Easy Rider, where he was clearly saying, "Now that's cool. Do you have any room on the back of that thing? I'd love to blow that popsicle stand." Well, it's clearly the coolest thing I ever did in my life, but it sure made me think. This was the first creative decision I'd ever made in my life. How did that happen? How could it happen again? Now, how about those people who make creative, innovative decisions every single day? How do they do that? So when I moved back to the United States and went back to graduate school, I discovered quickly I was not the only person that had that concern. About half of the Fortune 500 in the past 15 years has disappeared. 47% of the jobs between now and 15 years from now will be gone. 67% of adult males at the age of retirement judge themselves to be in a state of quiet desperation. IBM did a survey of 1,500 CEOs and found out the number one criteria that they're looking for, the number one skill they want in a future leader, is innovative thinking. I think that it is a do or die proposition. As I think of the people and organizations that have disappeared in my lifetime, I think they're a lot like a dinosaur driving an Edsel to a Blockbuster to rent a VHS tape of a Steven Seagal movie. That's the archetype I have in my head. And if you don't innovate, you will go the way of the dinosaur. Now, the problem is there is very little research on proven innovators. Now, let me show you this contextual diagram of the petri dish of the 4 components that are required for innovation to occur in an organization. You'll recognize yourself, your coworkers, and me in this diagram. On the equal meridian, you will see domain expertise. You've got to hire and continually feed information about your challenge, about your environment, about the clients that you serve to your thought, your knowledge workers. They have to have intrinsic motivation. They've got to be naturally curious about the subject that you exist to address. My role is in that bottom circle. I'm one of those people that can equip your knowledge worker and train them with the skills and expertise they need to be innovators. But your job is that top circle. You have got to be that transformational leader who creates the environment in which innovation can flourish. Do you do that? You need to. That's a critical part of your job. I learned that recently. I was deep sea fishing. We were 20 miles offshore for 2 days in the Gulf of Mexico. The captain says, "Well, Dennis, you've been a success so far. Would you like to go for the big one?" I said, "Well, yes," not knowing what that means. So he said, "Here, put on these chainmail gloves." And okay. He said, "Grab me a fish," which of course I did. I grabbed a 3-foot snapper. I thought he'd cut the tail off and use it as bait, but no, he used the entire fish. He put a grappling hook through the mouth of the fish, which was connected to a bowling ball, which was connected to a climbing rope. He threw it overboard. He handed me the rope. He said, "Don't get your hands between the rope and the boat. It'll get crushed. Don't get your leg caught up in the rope. You could go overboard to Davy Jones' locker. And if your hands get burning and you can't hang on to it, let it go. I've got your back." Well, it wasn't 30 seconds later that the rope was singing out of my hands, and that metal was burning hot. It was frying. I've got to let it go. I've got to let it go. He said, "Stand back and let it go," which I did. And it wasn't a moment later that rope became taut. And when it snapped a hold of that turnbuckle at the back of the boat, the entire thing heaved. I thought, good golly, what have we got on the back of that thing? He said, "All right, Dennis, reel it in." So for the next hour, I was the old man in the sea. It about killed me. My biceps didn't last 10 minutes pulling that thing. And then I had to put it over my shoulder. Then I couldn't even do that. I put it around my waist and I walked backwards. Took an hour to pull that thing in. It was a 360-pound grouper with a mouth big enough to swallow a basketball. I said, "Oh, I got to get a picture of that. Nobody will believe me." He said, "It ain't happening." I said, "Get the camera ready." So I jumped in, got the picture, jumped back out. No one else would believe it. Now, I treasure that memory because it taught me how important that transformational leader is. He created the environment, the structure, equipped me with the tools, the knowledge, the environment for success. Now, there's very little research on proven innovators. Unfortunately, most academic research is done on students of colleges who have not accomplished much with their life so far. My research partner, Dr. Maria Hunt, the former dean of Avila University, wanted to examine the top 1% of the top 1% of the most creative, successful people in our society, and we were very successful. By good fortune, we were able to interview the fellow who created the rotating heat shield for Apollo 13 for NASA, the founder of H&R Block, a composer who recently performed at Carnegie Hall, a woman who's a Guggenheim Fellow, an AIGA Fellow, CEOs that included one gentleman that took his company from $8 billion to $32 billion, another that took his share price from $5 to $100 a share, another privately held company that went from 0 to 490 million before they sold out. We got a 5-time amateur national boxing heavyweight champion who's now a stand-up comedy. The Heisman Trophy winner who became an attorney and then a $100 million CEO. An engineer with 9 patents. Artists, writers, college presidents, bank creators, sculptors. We were very fortunate to be blessed by their brilliance, and we examined each one under a microscope. And it was fascinating because 2 things happened. First of all, we discovered that they completely dispelled all the myths about innovation. Number 1, they were not hippies. Number 2, this was not a sloppy process. Number 3, it wasn't in a group. And number 4, they were not born with this. They considered this a craft that they worked on every single day, honing their skill. It's very interesting because they all said the same thing. They said, "Well, Dennis, I've never really talked to anyone about this before. It's kind of intimate. It's my special way of coming up with my creative ideas. And I took note. But the most shocking thing is what they considered intimate and unique was shared by my other consistent, high-performing innovators. They all did the same 3 things, the same tactics, the same 3 cognitive strategies they employed. I was stunned to discover this. Our next exercise was to go backwards in time and review the many biographies of high achievers that I had collected over time. So we looked for the same pattern that existed, and we went quite far back. Hammurabi, 1700 BC, was our oldest. And I saw this statue in person in the Louvre, where Hammurabi is portrayed in prayer speaking to his god Marduk, that led to the invention of the rule of law. Then we looked at Aristotle, Archimedes. Then in the Middle Ages, St. Ignatius of Loyola, Bacon, Franklin, Mozart, Kant. And in the modern century, Ford, Tesla, Hemingway, Sears, and just recently Stephen King, Jerry Seinfeld, Branson, Omidyar, Sarah Blakely, the inventor of Spanx, and Tina Fey. And it was remarkable that we discovered the same 3 parts of their methodology. Most affirming to us, we found confirmation in other branches of science. In behavioral economics, the man who won the Nobel Prize, Daniel Kahneman, he wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow. That helped us explain what these high achievers were doing, how the prefrontal cortex is managing the subconscious. Tan Lee in the year 2010 created the portable EEG machine that allowed us to put that on people's heads and examine where is their mind going during that moment of innovation. Thinking Fast and Slow helped us best understand the cognitive inquiry that was going on, the cognitive linguists of the inquiry that precedes innovation. I get so excited about this discovery because it's something that each person here can use. You can employ it starting today. It's not dependent on age or experience or wealth or IQ or geography, anything of that. Matter of fact, if you give me your card or send me an email, I will connect you with the International Journal of Innovation, Education, and Research, which is publishing our article, and you can see all the data for yourselves.